Some stories don't start with love or laughter. They start with loss. And this one? It started the night Dave's world shattered, the night his dreams burned to ashes in a twisted mess of metal and silence. Before we dive deep, tell me, where are you watching from? The US? Canada? The UK? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this story travels. And hey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss the twists and turns in this story, because trust me, what's coming next will stay with you. Dave used to be the guy everyone wanted to be. Tall. Sharp. That kind of easy smile that made professors remember his name and classmates fight to have him on their project teams. And the brains? Oh, he had those too. First-class student. A problem solver. The guy you called when life threw you a curveball. By graduation, he had it all lined up. A job offer with a tech company he'd dreamed of joining. A girlfriend who swore she'd follow him to the ends of the earth. A future so bright it felt like the universe itself had cleared the path for him. Everything felt perfect. Like he was standing on the edge of something beautiful, ready to soar. But life doesn't ask permission to change. It was raining that night. The kind of heavy rain that makes the streets gleam under the traffic lights, slick and dangerous. Dave didn't mind, he loved driving in the rain. Something about the rhythm of the drops on the windshield calmed him, made him think clearer. He had the radio on, humming to his girlfriend's favorite song, replaying her laugh in his head, when it happened. A screech. A blur of headlights. The deafening crunch of metal twisting in ways it was never meant to. Then, silence. And the smell. Gasoline. Smoke. Blood. He tried to move. To call for help. But the darkness swallowed him before the panic could take root. When Dave woke up, the first thing he saw was the ceiling. White. Sterile. Too bright. The second thing he saw was his mother, face pale, eyes red and swollen from crying. "Dave," she whispered, choking back a sob. "You're awake." He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, the words barely a rasp. "Mom, my legs." And then he saw her expression. That look broke him more than any doctor's words ever could. The news came in pieces, but the words that stayed were brutal. Spinal injury. Severe. Permanent. He'd never walk again. At first, he refused to believe it. He told himself it was just temporary. That with time, with enough therapy, he'd be back on his feet. Back to running, laughing, living. But deep down, something in him already knew. The days that followed blurred into one long nightmare. The hospital became his world. White walls. The hum of machines. The smell of antiseptic that clung to his clothes even when he finally went home. At first, there were visitors. Friends from university. Co-workers. His girlfriend. They'd come in laughing, trying to keep the mood light. "You'll be fine, Dave," they'd say. "You're strong. You'll beat this." But as the weeks turned into months, the visits slowed. Calls stopped. Messages went unanswered. Life moved on without him. And then there was her. His girlfriend. The one who'd promised to stay, to fight for him, to love him through anything. She tried. God, she tried. She'd sit by his bed, bring him food, tell him stories from the outside world to remind him life was still happening. But with every therapy session, with every reminder that this was his new reality, her smile grew tighter. Her visits shorter. Until one day, she just stopped coming. 2 weeks later, his phone buzzed with a message. "Dave, I'm so sorry. I can't do this. I hope you understand." Understand? No. He didn't understand. How do you understand someone walking away when you need them most? Nights were the hardest. The room would go dark. The nurses would disappear down the hall. And Dave would lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying his old life in his head. The laughter. The plans. The future that had been stolen from him in one violent, unforgiving moment. Sometimes, in those long, endless nights, his thoughts turned darker. What if he just stopped? Stopped trying. Stopped breathing. Would anyone even notice? But then morning would come, and the nurses would smile, and he'd paste on that brave face again. Because what else could he do? The months dragged on. Therapy started. Painful, grueling sessions that left him drenched in sweat and frustration. Progress was slow, agonizingly slow. Every small improvement felt swallowed by the reminder that walking again wasn't part of his story anymore. And the loneliness? It became a constant companion. His phone barely buzzed. The people who used to swear they'd always have his back were ghosts now. Out of sight, out of mind. Except for his mom. She was always there. Quiet but steady. The one anchor keeping him from drowning completely. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the room was bathed in that soft orange glow, Dave sat by the window in his wheelchair. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars honking in the distance. Children laughing on the sidewalk. Couples holding hands, walking like they had all the time in the world. And him? He was just stuck. Stuck in a body that didn't feel like his. Stuck in a life he didn't ask for. Stuck in the silence of a room that reminded him daily of everything he'd lost. But life. Life has this strange way of surprising you when you least expect it. Of sending someone back into your orbit when you've already given up on hope. And for Dave, that someone was Anita. He didn't know it then. But that simple message, just a quiet, "Hey, Dave, it's been a while. How are you?" would change everything. Because sometimes, the people you least expect to stay, are the ones who end up saving you. Funny how one small message can change everything. 3 simple words. "Hey, Dave, hi." That's all it took for the quiet to crack, for the first sliver of light to cut through the heavy darkness that had wrapped itself around his world. Dave stared at his phone for what felt like hours. His thumb hovered over the screen, frozen, like replying might open a door he wasn't ready to walk through. Anita. He hadn't seen her name in years. Back in university, she'd been his person, the friend who understood him without him having to explain, who could sit with him in silence and still make him feel less alone. She wasn't just a friend, she was home, somehow. After graduation, life did what life always does. It got busy. She landed a job in another city. He buried himself in work and his relationship. Slowly, the calls faded. The texts came less often. Until one day, they stopped altogether. And now, here she was, breaking through the silence like no time had passed. But Dave didn't reply. Not that night. Not even the next morning. What could he possibly say? "Hey, Anita, guess what? My life exploded. I'm a shell of who I used to be, and the guy you once knew. He doesn't exist anymore." No. Silence was easier. A day later, another message came. "I heard about the accident. I'm so sorry, Dave. I should have reached out sooner. How are you holding up?" He read it. Locked his phone. Placed it on the nightstand like it burned to touch it. Because pity? Pity was worse than loneliness. And he'd had enough of people's pity to last a lifetime. But Anita wasn't like other people. She'd always been different. A week passed. Then another ping. "I know you probably don't feel like talking. That's okay. But I want you to know I'm here. No pressure. Just, here." That one sat with him. It wasn't pushy. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Sure. Like her. Like it always had been. That night, when the house was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the ceiling fan, he typed back. I'm surviving. Thanks for checking in. For a second, he hovered over delete. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she didn't actually care, not really. But then he hit send, tossed the phone on his bed, and tried to pretend his heart wasn't racing. The next morning, her reply came. Surviving is enough, Dave. One day at a time. I'm proud of you for that. It was such a simple thing. But it felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in months. They started talking. Slowly, cautiously at first. How have you been? What are you up to these days? I can't believe it's been this long. But as the days turned into weeks, the conversations grew deeper. Dave started sharing pieces of his pain, little pieces at first, careful and hesitant, like testing the water before stepping in. He told her about the accident. About how it felt to wake up and realize his life had been split in two, before and after. About the people who disappeared, the friends who'd promised to always be there but vanished when things got hard. About the girl who'd sworn to love him forever, until forever came with wheels and hospital bills. And Anita, she didn't tell him to cheer up. She didn't offer empty advice or hollow, stay strong, speeches. She just listened. Some days, he'd type, I don't even recognize myself anymore. I get that, she'd reply. But you're still you, Dave. That part of you, it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. A month later, she asked if she could visit. Dave froze. The thought of her seeing him like this, thinner, weaker, broken in ways that went beyond his body, filled him with dread. He almost said no. Almost told her it was better if they kept it to texts and late-night chats. But then, somewhere deep down, a quiet voice whispered, maybe it's time. Sure, he typed. Saturday. 3 p.m. Saturday came faster than he expected. Twice, he almost cancelled. Once, he even drafted the text, sorry, not today. Maybe another time. But his mom, wise and quiet as ever, just squeezed his shoulder and said, let her in, David. Let someone in. So when the bell rang, he didn't move. Not at first. Then he wheeled himself slowly to the door, heart pounding, hands clammy. And there she was. Anita. Time had been kind to her. Her hair was longer now, falling in a neat braid over her shoulder. She still had that same easy smile, the one that made you feel like the room had just gotten warmer. Hey, stranger, she said softly, her voice like sunlight. Dave tried to smile, but his throat tightened. Hey, he managed. And in that moment, something shifted. They talked for hours that afternoon. About nothing and everything. About the old days, the professors they used to tease, the cheap takeout dinners when neither of them had money, the way the campus always smelled like rain. And when the conversation dipped into silence, it wasn't awkward. It was easy. Like slipping into something familiar. When she finally left that evening, the room didn't feel as heavy. For the first time in a long time, Dave slept without tossing and turning. After that, Anita became a constant. She visited often, after work, on weekends, sometimes just to sit with him and watch movies they'd seen a dozen times. Some days, she'd coax him into going out. Small outings at first, a coffee shop nearby, a quiet park. The first time, his hands trembled the entire drive. He hated the way people stared, the way strangers' eyes lingered too long. But Anita stayed close, steady, like an anchor in rough water. Let them look, she whispered once, squeezing his hand. You're still you, Dave. That doesn't change. Not for me. Not for anyone. It wasn't the big gestures that healed him. It was the little things. The way she texted good morning and good night, even on days they didn't see each other. The way she laughed at his jokes. Real, belly-deep laughter that made him forget, even for a moment, what he'd lost. The way she looked at him, not with pity, not with discomfort, but with the same quiet familiarity she'd always had. For the first time in a long time, Dave started to believe maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as broken as he thought. One evening, they sat on the porch. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" Anita asked quietly, her gaze on the horizon. Dave's chest tightened. "Every day," he admitted. His voice cracked, and he didn't bother hiding it. She nodded slowly. "I get that," she said. Then, softer, "But you know what I see when I look at you?" He turned to her, wary. "What?" "Strength," she said simply. "Not because of what happened. But because you're still here. Because you didn't give up when it would have been so easy to." The words caught him off guard. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Just sat there, letting her words settle, sinking into the kind of quiet that didn't demand filling. And so it went, day after day, week after week. The laughter came easier. The silences less sharp. And slowly, the hollow ache in Dave's chest began to fade. He didn't call it love. Not yet. Maybe he was afraid to. Maybe he wasn't ready to believe someone could see him, all of him, and still stay. But every time Anita showed up, steady and unshaken, something in him bloomed quietly, stubbornly, like a seed finding sunlight after a long winter. And for the first time in a very long time, hope didn't feel like a cruel joke. It felt real. There's a moment, a quiet, almost ordinary moment, when you realize something has changed. For Dave, it wasn't a dramatic declaration or fireworks in the sky. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. The kind of rain that hummed against the windows and made the whole house feel smaller, cozier. Anita was curled up on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, laughing at some dumb movie they'd watched a dozen times. And just like that, the thought hit him, sharp and soft at the same time. God. I think I'm falling for her. At first, he tried to ignore it. Told himself it was just gratitude. She'd been there when no one else had. She'd listened, cared, reminded him that he was more than his broken body. Of course he felt something. Anyone would. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It was there in the mornings when her texts were the first thing he read. It was there in the quiet evenings, when her voice over the phone somehow made the house feel less empty. And it was there in the way he caught himself watching her, memorizing the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way her presence softened the sharp edges of his world. Gratitude wasn't a big enough word for what he felt. But love terrified him. Because what if he let himself believe in it? What if he leaned into this thing, let it take root in his chest, and then she left? Everyone left eventually. His friends. The girl who'd sworn to love him through anything. Why would Anita be any different? The fear sat heavy in his chest, a quiet ache that followed him even on the good days. One late afternoon, they sat together in the garden behind his house. It wasn't much of a garden, a few stubborn roses his mom tended, a patch of grass, a wooden bench that creaked when the wind blew too hard, but Anita loved it. She said it felt peaceful, like the world slowed down there. "You're quiet today," she said softly, breaking the silence. Dave forced a smile. "Just tired, I guess." But Anita had known him too long to buy the lie. She tilted her head, studying him with that calm, steady gaze. "Dave," she said gently, "talk to me." For a second, the words hovered right there, perched on the edge of his tongue. How she'd become the reason he looked forward to mornings again. How the sound of her laugh stitched pieces of him back together. How he didn't know how to live in a world where she wasn't in it. But fear won. Instead, he muttered, "I just don't want to hold you back." Anita frowned, confusion knitting her brows. Hold me back. From what? From living, Dave said, his voice low, almost ashamed. You're incredible, Anita. You deserve someone who can give you the world. Someone who can stand beside you, walk beside you. Not, he gestured to the chair, the word catching in his throat. Not this. The silence that followed was thick. Then Anita moved closer, kneeling until her eyes met his. Dave, she said, her voice steady, do you honestly think that's what matters to me? That your worth is tied to whether you can walk? His throat tightened. He tried to look away, but she reached out, gently touching his arm. Look at me, she whispered. And when he did, her gaze was fierce. Unflinching. You are not your chair. You're not your accident. You're you. The same man who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The same man who made me laugh until my sides hurt. That hasn't changed. You haven't changed. The lump in his throat swelled until it was hard to breathe. He didn't trust his voice, so he didn't say anything. And in that quiet garden, with the late afternoon light stretching soft and golden around them, something shifted. From that night on, things were different. Not in obvious ways. There were no grand confessions, no dramatic declarations. But the air between them was warmer. Charged. Anita's visits grew longer. Their conversation stretched late into the night. The silences between them grew easier, deeper, the kind of silences that felt full, not empty. And when she laughed, Dave found himself watching her, memorizing the way the sound danced through the room, how it made everything, even him, feel lighter. It was the small moments that undid him. Like the morning she showed up with coffee, just because she knew he hadn't slept. Or the afternoon she sat beside him during therapy, quiet but steady, her presence enough to keep the frustration from swallowing him whole. Or the evening she dozed off on the couch beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder, and he sat there for hours, afraid to move, afraid to break the fragile peace that had settled over them. Each moment carved its way deeper into him, until the thought of life without her felt impossible. But even as their bond deepened, doubt lingered. There were nights when he stared at the ceiling, that ugly voice in his head whispering that she deserved more. Someone whole. Someone strong. Someone who wouldn't hold her back. One night, unable to sleep, he typed out a message he never sent. You deserve someone better than me. Someone who can take you places, dance with you, live without limits. I'm scared that one day you'll realize that, and walk away. His thumb hovered over the screen. Delete. Send. Delete. Send. Finally, he deleted it. But the fear stayed. Then came the day he slipped at the therapy center. It was minor, just a misstep, a sharp pain that faded quickly, but it rattled him. It reminded him, with cruel clarity, how fragile everything was now. By the time Anita arrived that evening, he was a storm of anger and shame. You shouldn't be here, he snapped the moment she stepped through the door. She froze, confusion flashing across her face. Dave. Just go, Anita, he cut in, his voice sharp, harsh in a way that made him flinch even as he said it. You don't have to keep doing this. You don't have to keep babysitting me. Something in her expression shifted. Hurt. And then, resolve. Is that what you think this is? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. Babysitting? Dave looked away, shame curling tight in his chest. Dave, she said again, softer this time but no less certain, I'm here because I want to be. Because you matter to me. You can push me away if you want. Yell. Shut me out. But don't you dare tell me what I feel. Don't you dare make my choices for me. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. And just like that, the anger drained out of him, leaving nothing but exhaustion. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice breaking. Anita stepped closer, her gaze softening. You don't have to be perfect with me, she said gently. You don't have to be strong all the time. Just, let me be here. That's all I want. To be here. Something in him cracked open that night. For the first time, Dave let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't going anywhere. And from there, the shift was undeniable. The laughter came easier. The walls between them thinner. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Dave stopped counting the ways he might lose her and started memorizing the ways she made him feel alive. One evening, they sat together in the living room. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and some quiet song played low in the background. Anita was telling him a story about work, laughing at some ridiculous thing her boss had done, her hands moving as she talked. And Dave, watching her, thought. This is it. Not the grand gestures. Not the dramatic moments. Just this. Her. Here. And for the first time, the thought didn't terrify him. It felt right. Dave didn't tell her that night. But he knew. In the quiet spaces between her words, in the way her presence steadied his restless thoughts, in the way his chest ached when she smiled, he knew. This wasn't gratitude. This wasn't just friendship. This was love. The morning felt too quiet for a day like this. Dave woke before the alarm. For a while he just watched the light slide across the ceiling, thin, patient lines that made the room look softer than it was. He could hear the house coming alive down the hall, a kettle whining, his mom's low voice, a cousin laughing at something on the phone. Life, moving. Humming. As if it wasn't the day everything would change. He breathed in slow. Out slower. The suit waited on the chair beside the bed, navy, clean lines, understated. It wasn't loud. He liked that. He didn't want the suit to say anything for him. Not today. A soft knock. You up? His mom called. Yeah. She pushed the door open with her hip, carrying a small box and trying not to cry. That was a losing battle. It had been a losing battle all week. You're not supposed to see the bride, she said instead of hello, eyes bright, but there's no rule about your mother. He smiled. You sure? Feels like there should be. She set the box in his lap, then smoothed the duvet like she used to do when he was 8 and flew hot. From me, she said. And from him. Him. She didn't say the name. She didn't need to. Dave lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in tissue, a pair of cufflinks, round, simple, brushed steel with a thin inlay of onyx. Elegant without trying. On the velvet beneath, someone had written in his father's tidy hand. Be gentle with yourself. Be brave with your love. Heat rose behind his eyes before he could stop it. He swallowed, blinked hard, nodded. Help me put them on. Of course. She stood behind him, steady fingers working the fabric at his wrists, then fussed with his collar, then fussed with nothing at all, just to keep her hands busy. You look like him, she whispered finally. And like yourself. He'd be. God, David, he'd be so proud. He leaned into her palm when she cupped his cheek. I hope so. You don't have to hope, she said. You just have to breathe. The rest will meet you where you are. He laughed, a short, shaky sound, and she laughed too, and for a second the room felt easy again. The venue had been chosen for a reason. Not because it was grand, it wasn't. Because it was honest. Cream walls. Warm wood. Windows that let the afternoon pour in. There were ramps where there needed to be ramps, and space where there needed to be space. Thoughtfulness in the corners. It felt like them. By the time the car pulled up, guests were already drifting through the doors in lifted pairs of voices. A cousin waved from the steps. A college friend touched his shoulder, awkward and earnest. A former coworker said something about how good it was to see him out. People meant well. He let them. Inside, the air carried that quiet, fizzy excitement you only hear right before something important. Anita's friends clustered near the aisle, whispering and smiling and dabbing the corners of their eyes as if someone had turned the faucet to gentle tears. In the back, a few men he recognized from before stood stiff, their good intentions wrapped in guilt. You could almost hear all the unsaid apologies rattling around in their pockets. Dave rolled into the small room set aside for him and closed the door. He needed 2 minutes. Just 2. He set his hands on the push rims and looked at himself in the mirror, the clean line of the jacket, the cufflinks catching light like a quiet wink. He didn't see defeat there. He didn't see pity. He saw a man who'd learned how to breathe through the fire and still be kind. The door creaked. His best man, Ade, loud where Dave was quiet, popped his head in. "They're lining up. You ready, Chief?" "No," Dave said, and smiled. "But let's go." The hall hushed as he entered. Not the kind of hush that stings. The kind that settles. The kind that says, "We see you. We're here." He took his place near the front, wheels angled just so, fingers tapping an uneven rhythm against his thigh. The officiant smiled, a woman with the kind of voice that could calm a storm, and whispered, "Breathe." He did. He tried. Then the music began. You'd think he would look at the door. Everyone else did. But the first thing he saw was his mother's hands folded tight in her lap and the way she blinked fast, as if trying to memorize a sun and a second at the same time. Then his eyes went where they always went when his world felt bigger than he could hold, the aisle. Anita stepped in, and sound happened around her. People gasped, a child whispered wow, somebody's bracelet clinked, but in Dave's chest there was just this slow, widening quiet. Like the part of the ocean that doesn't make waves. She wasn't radiant because of the dress, though the dress was a miracle, lace like water, soft lines that didn't try to prove anything. She was radiant because of the way she looked at him. Straight. Warm. Certain. Like she'd spent the whole morning walking toward a truth she already knew. Halfway down, she paused to wipe a tear with the back of her hand and laughed at herself, and the room laughed with her because it was impossible not to. Then she reached him. The world steadied. "You made it," she whispered, joking, but her eyes gave away what the words would have spoiled. "I choose you. I'd choose you again." "Wouldn't miss it," he said, and his voice broke on miss. They both pretended it didn't. Vows. They'd written their own, and then they'd both panicked about it, and then they'd promised to keep it simple. Dave went first. He didn't read much. He didn't have to. "You sat with me," he said, "when all I could hear was the sound of what I'd lost. You didn't try to drag me somewhere brighter. You just sat in the dark until my eyes adjusted. You reminded me there's a life here. There's laughter here. There's me here. And somehow there's you. I can't promise I won't be afraid sometimes. But I can promise I'll never disappear. Not from you. Not from us. I'm here. Fully. Always." Anita listened like the words were a warm drink. When it was her turn, she took his hands, thumbs brushing the edge of his palm like she was telling the truth there first. "I don't love you despite anything," she said. "I love you because you are kind on the days it would be easier not to be. Because you tell the truth when it costs you. Because you laugh at my worst jokes and save your best ones for when I need them most. Because you taught me that love isn't loud, it's loyal. I promise to stand with you when the world is soft and when it isn't. To build a life that fits us. To hold the door, hold my tongue, hold your hand. I'm here. Fully. Always. Rings. A kiss that wasn't dramatic and therefore was perfect. Applause that swelled and then softened into a happy murmur, people turning to each other with that look that says, okay, maybe love really does work sometimes. They were still smiling when the officiant stepped aside and motioned to a man Dave hadn't noticed in the second row, broad shoulders, silver at the temples, a face that had spent years not saying more than it needed to. He stood. The room pivoted to him as if he were a question mark finally standing up straight. "Good afternoon," he said into the small mic, voice even, practiced. "My name is Richard. I was your father's attorney, David." The hush was instant. Palpable. Dave felt his mother stiffen a row behind him. He felt his own chest go strange and light, like a step missed in the dark. Richard nodded, a small, respectful thing. "Your father asked me to speak to you on this day in particular, if it came. He hoped it would." A sad smile. He trusted that it would. Heads tilted. A rustle of fabric. Someone coughed because someone always does when something important is about to happen. Before he passed, Richard continued, "Your father prepared a letter and certain instructions. He was a private man in public and a tender man in private. He wanted you to have both protection and freedom. The letter is for you. The instructions are for this room." He glanced at Anita then, as if to make sure she was included. "David," he said, choosing the name carefully, "your father wished for you to be told, in the presence of your wife and your people, that you are his sole heir. To his companies. To his properties. To his stake in the foundations you know and the ones you don't. The Bennett estate," a whisper went through the room, "now even the ones who hadn't connected the dots understood, passes entirely to you." For a beat, no one moved. Then the room reacted like rooms do, gasps trying not to be gasps, whispers trying not to be whispers, someone's chair scraping a little too loud. You could see the math landing on faces. "Bennett? That Bennett?" And then the rearranging that happens inside people when they discover their idea of you was too small. Dave didn't move at all. He'd known pieces of it, of course. Not the timing. Not the how of it. He had changed his name years ago after the break. His father had wanted that, insisted even, "Build without mine. If you ever want it back, it will be waiting. But I want you to be a man first, not a headline." Dave had been angry then grateful, and then both. The accident had sanded the world down to one small room at a time. The estate, the press, all of that had felt like something happening to someone else. But Anita. He'd never told Anita the whole thing. Not because he didn't trust her. Because he needed, to know she'd chosen his actual life, not a myth with a famous last name. He felt her fingers slide into his. Anchor. Pulse. Present. She leaned close, cheek nearly against his temple. "Hey," she whispered, steady as breath, "look at me." He did. "Billionaire, barista, botanist," she murmured, mouth curving, eyes soft, "you're just Dave. The man I married 5 minutes ago. That's the whole story." He laughed, a wet laugh that made his throat ache, and nodded once. "Enough." Richard cleared his throat. "There is one more thing," he said carefully. "Your father left a message to be played if you wished it. Only if you wished it." He met Dave's eyes like a person who'd carried secrets that belonged to other people and wanted, for once, to lay one down gently. Dave swallowed. Looked at his mother. She nodded through tears. He looked at Anita. She squeezed his hand. "Play it," Dave said. A staffer wheeled in a small screen. The room reshaped itself around it, people turning, shoulders angling, quiet finding its place again. The video opened on a study, books, sunlight, a plant that needed watering. His father sat in a sweater, not a suit, hair more gray than the last time Dave had seen him in person. He looked smaller. Softer. The kind of tired that tells the truth. "Son," he began, and had to stop, because his eyes had already filled. He laughed at himself, wiped them with his thumb. "I promised your mother I wouldn't be dramatic." A ripple of laughter moved through the room like a friendly thing. I have made a career of being seen, his father said. And a life of being careful about what parts of me get looked at. I didn't want that for you. Not the noise. Not the opinions. I wanted you to learn your own center without the world telling you what it should be. He breathed in, slow. If you're watching this, it means you chose love. I suspected you would. You always were brave in the ways that matter. The money is the least of it. Truly. Use it like a tool, not a mirror. Let it build what you and your wife dream when the house is quiet and the world isn't asking for a quote. Be gentle with yourself. Be brave with your love. The screen dimmed. The room sat very still, as if movement would break something important. Dave wiped his face with the back of his hand, inelegant and perfect. Someone somewhere sniffed too loud and didn't pretend it was anything else. He turned to Anita. I'm sorry I didn't. She shook her head. No apologies, she said. You told me what mattered. The rest is furniture. He blinked. Furniture. Pretty. Useful. Not the point. He laughed. There it was again, the return of ease after the swell. He hadn't known if that would be possible today. It was. The reception moved like receptions do, first relief, then hunger, then 100 small hellos. But the air was changed, tilted. People who'd once vanished reappeared with warm, embarrassed smiles. Some offered real apologies. Some offered the performance of apology because it's what you do near newly disclosed wealth. Dave could tell the difference. He didn't keep score. It wasn't that kind of day. A man he hadn't seen since the hospital months, a friend who'd visited twice and then not again, stood at the edge of the room, folding and unfolding a napkin like he needed to occupy his hands while he found his words. Dave wheeled over first. Hey, he said. Thanks for coming. The man's throat worked. I should have come sooner. When it mattered more. It still matters, Dave said, and meant it. Grace didn't have to be dramatic to be true. At the head table, someone tapped a glass. Toasts. Ade went up and did what Ade does, told a ridiculous story about a day the three of them had tried to cook and nearly set off an alarm, and then pivoted, without warning, to sincerity that made people bite their lips to keep from crying again. To Anita, he finished, for loving my brother with a loyalty that made the rest of us braver. Glasses raised. Hands wiped at eyes. The world stayed soft. Then the music changed, and the DJ announced the first dance. A few heads tilted, habit, tradition, and then smiled as they remembered there isn't only one way to do anything worth doing. Anita knelt and kissed Dave's knuckles, then stood and slipped behind him, fingers finding the handles of his chair. He tipped his head back to look at her, and she leaned down to press her forehead to his. Ready, she whispered. Always, he said. They didn't dance the way a script would write it. They moved. Together. She guided him in gentle circles. He reached up, hand at her waist, steadying her while she steadied him. It was slow. It was careful. It was beautiful in the way we forget simple can be. When the song swelled, the room blurred, lights, faces, the clink of a fork somewhere far away, and there was only the two of them, practicing the kind of choreography marriage actually requires. You move, I falter, you hold, we breathe, we begin again. By the end, people were clapping and crying in equal measure. An ant crossed herself. A teenager mouthed goals. Ade Wolf whistled like an idiot. It was perfect. Later, when the noise thinned, Dave found Anita on the balcony. City light dusted the edge of her veil. Beyond the railing, traffic stitched its red and white lines across the night like someone was hemming the horizon. Hey, wife, he said. She turned, smiling with her whole face. Hey, husband. They stood like that a minute. Not talking. Not needing to. I kept the Bennett part quiet, he said finally. Not because I didn't trust you. Because I needed. I know, she said. You wanted to be loved as yourself. He looked down, then back up. Thank you for making that easy. She shook her head. You made it easy. You were yourself. He laughed. That's the hardest thing I've ever done. Then we're already good at hard things, she said. We'll be fine. From inside, the DJ dragged them back with the promise of cake. He offered his hand. She took it. They didn't rush. On the way in, he glanced across the room. For a flicker of a second he saw a version of his life that might have been, the headlines, the handshakes, the deals for the sake of deals, and he felt nothing like envy for it. He felt grateful for the accident that had taken so much and given him a truer measure of everything left. For the months of quiet that had taught him the sound of Anita's steadiness. For this moment, ordinary and enormous. Back at the table, his mother slid a folded envelope into his pocket, the letter from the study. For later, she mouthed. He nodded. Later. When the house was still and the night had hands. He looked at Anita. She looked at him. Somewhere a fork hit the floor and someone cheered. He didn't know why. He didn't need to. The surprise had landed. The world had shifted. But the center hadn't moved at all. It was still her hand in his. Still his name in her mouth. Still two people choosing the same small, sacred yes, over and over, in a room full of people who finally understood. He wasn't just the son of a late billionaire. He was a man loved on purpose. The first morning after the wedding didn't feel like the whirlwind of the night before. The house was quiet. The air felt softer somehow, like even the walls knew something had changed. The flowers from the reception sat tired but beautiful on the counter. The veil Anita had worn was draped carelessly over a chair, like even it had exhaled after the chaos. Dave woke first. He didn't move for a while. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of Anita's breathing beside him. For the first time in years, he didn't wake with that ache, the one that had been his companion since the accident. That gnawing question of why me was gone. In its place, there was something softer. Quieter. Peace. By mid-morning, the world had already started knocking. News outlets calling for comments. Strangers camped outside the gate. Business partners reaching out to congratulate him, some genuine, others not. But Dave didn't rush to answer. Instead, he and Anita made coffee. Sat at the small kitchen table, her legs curled under her, his hands wrapped around the warm mug. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. There, in the quiet of their first morning as husband and wife, they let the world wait. The letter sat on his desk for a week before he opened it. The same letter his father's attorney had mentioned on the wedding day. When he finally did, Anita sat beside him, her hand warm over his. His father's words were steady and sure, like the man himself. This legacy isn't a chain. It's a tool. Use it to make the world softer. Use it to build the life you've always wanted. But most of all, use it to love. Deeply. Fully. Loudly if you want, quietly if you need. I was proud of you long before you knew my name would matter to anyone else. And I will always be proud. Be gentle with yourself. Be brave with your love. Dave didn't speak when he finished reading. Didn't need to. Anita just leaned her forehead against his and whispered, he'd be proud. So proud. The weeks that followed were chaos. Paparazzi outside the gate. Reporters digging into his past. Old acquaintances suddenly remembering his number. Invitations to events he'd never heard of before. It was overwhelming, the way the world tried to pull at him. But Anita was steady. One night, when the noise felt too loud, Dave sat on the edge of their bed, head in his hands. "Maybe I wasn't built for this," he said. Anita knelt in front of him, took his hands, and smiled softly. "Then we build something different," she said. "Our way. Always our way." And that's what they did. They stayed in the modest home they'd built their memories in, even as the world expected them to move somewhere bigger, louder, richer. They turned the inheritance into something purposeful. A new therapy center in their community, where people could heal without the weight of bills. Scholarships for kids chasing big dreams with empty pockets. Silent donations to hospitals that had once kept him alive. None of it was announced. No press conferences. No photo ops. Because Dave didn't need the world to see what mattered. Life, for all its changes, was still beautifully ordinary. On Saturday mornings, Anita would wake before him, hair in a messy bun, humming quietly in the kitchen while she made breakfast. He'd roll in, still half asleep, just to tease her about burning the toast again. On quiet evenings, they'd sit together on the porch, her curled up on the swing, him beside her, watching the sun dip below the horizon, talking about nothing and everything all at once. And in those moments, it never mattered how much money sat in the bank or how many headlines had their names in them. What mattered was that they'd built this. Together. 2 years later, when Anita placed his hand on her stomach and whispered, "We're going to be parents," Dave cried. Big, unashamed tears that left his shirt damp and his heart aching in the best way. And when their daughter was born, small and perfect, with Anita's eyes and Dave's quiet calm, he thought of every moment that had brought him here. The accident. The loneliness. The nights when he'd thought there was nothing left worth waking up for. And then Anita's voice, soft and sure beside him in the hospital room. "She's going to know she's loved. Every single day. By both of us." Parenthood wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, mornings that blurred into afternoons, and days when the noise of the world threatened to creep back in. But there was also joy. So much joy. First steps taken in their living room. First words that made them laugh until their stomachs hurt. Sunday mornings in the park, where their daughter would run across the grass, hair flying, while Dave and Anita watched from their bench, hands intertwined. And through it all, they were a team. Always a team. Years passed, and the headlines faded. People stopped camping outside their home. The world moved on to newer stories, shinier names. And Dave was grateful. Because in the quiet, away from the noise, life was rich in the ways that mattered most. Dinners with family. Lazy afternoons filled with books and music. Quiet nights where their daughter fell asleep between them during movie marathons. And every so often, Dave would catch Anita looking at him the way she had that first day she'd walked back into his life, steady, certain, like she'd known all along. One evening, when their daughter was 5, she climbed into his lap, small hands on his cheeks, and asked, "Daddy, how did you meet Mommy?" Dave smiled, heart full. "Your mommy," he said, "saved me." Anita, sitting nearby, shook her head with a laugh. "No," she corrected gently, crossing the room to press a kiss to his temple. "We saved each other. And maybe that's what love really is. Not the big, loud moments. Not the surprises or the headlines or the fairy tales. But the quiet courage of choosing each other. Every day. In the dark. In the light. In the quiet spaces where no one is watching. Because that's what Anita and Dave built. Not a life defined by the accident. Not a marriage defined by the fortune. But a home. One where love wasn't a question or a performance, it was a steady, undeniable truth. And that, friends, is how Anita and Dave built their forever, not from money or luck, but from patience, loyalty, and love that never asked for proof. If this story touched your heart, drop a red heart in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all over the world come together to share these moments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this, they remind us that no matter what life takes from us, love, real love, has a way of giving us more than we ever thought possible.